It's time for the Rose Chat Podcast, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the world's most beloved flower, the rose. Join award-winning gardeners Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington as they chat with rose lovers and experts from around the globe. With each episode, you'll gain valuable knowledge and insights to achieve the rose garden you've always dreamed of. Listen now as we explore the world of roses.
My guest today is no stranger to many of you, as you know her as the Rose Geek on Facebook and on YouTube and other social media. Now today she's here to tell us about a trip she took to England last summer and how being in England changed her and her garden. Ooh, this is interesting. Hey, Kimberly, welcome to Rose Chat.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy to catch up with you, and I'm excited today to talk about trips that I've taken.
Oh, I am so excited to hear. But before we get into all of that, how's your garden season going so far?
You know, every year is going to be different. And so it's interesting as I go out there and I'm looking at a particular variety and I'm saying, wow, you really popped last year. You were amazing. And then this year, it's just, variety specific. Some of them, are a little bit different. And that's one of the things that I love about gardening is it's unpredictable. It's never the same. There's always something to learn from in the garden. But this year, I've had longer blooms, an earlier season and a longer season than in the past. Is that because the roses are aging? Is it because of the fertilizers and the boosters I'm using? I have no idea right now, but I'm going to continue to enjoy it. So we had, typically our roses start blooming the last week in May. And this year, they really wanted to jump out of the gate the first week in May, and I pushed them back a little bit, some of those buds, but I would say it really didn't push them back very far because by the second week in May, we were in a full flush, and here we are almost a month later, and I still have more blooms than I've ever had. So it's
that's certainly a big win. We had a lot of damage and did a lot of cutting. And then once we got the garden ready, we've had absolutely no rain. So what I'm seeing, blooms are lasting longer, but they're a different color. They're more faint. It's just been so hot and so dry. I've never seen it like this before.
We it is very dry, and I can't remember the last time it rained. And so I'm really trying to take a hard look at definitely my planters. They need water very early in the season. We don't normally experience this. And I'm seeing that some of the blooms are smaller than they have been, kind of like they would be during the heat of the summer, really. So you're right. That is something that, is different with this year.
Well, so far that would be my biggest issue. Is that your biggest issue? If you've got something else that's bigger than that?
Well, thrips, I always, in the hubbub of it, I don't pre-treat things. And I want to have a no spray garden. I want to be organic in the way that I garden. And so whenever I get a flush, I'm just kind of making note of which ones are magnets for thrips. And I'm going to, kind of keep a little log so that as we're looking at the end of the season, which roses might not be a good fit for me. It might be those roses that have thrips. And so I would say that that's the biggest hurdle that I have right now is just looking at roses that are not happy and being in a no spray garden, but it's an easy fix, just finding varieties that do fit.
We're lucky today. We have so many new varieties, and they are disease resistant, and we are getting more fragrance. I mean, truly, I'm just seeing some spectacular new roses that I trialed, and now they're in my garden, and they're just fabulous.
Oh, talking about new roses, I really want you to tell me about your rose. So a couple of weeks ago, you put out with High Country. You've partnered with them. Tell us about that really quick.
Well, it's Petite Peach. It's a sport I found 4 years ago. That's just something that happens. God's a heavy hitter on that one. It just happens naturally in the garden. And I found a sport. It was peach. It was on petite pink, which I have 9 of. So I think I've just loved it so much that it just gave me a gift. I've had so many of them, loved it so much that it gave me a gift. So that's from hybridizer and good friend David Slezak. So I called David and I said, whoa, petite pink has done something very unusual, but very pretty. So we just started taking cuttings and working on it, getting in some trials and working on the patent. And so we partnered with Matt out of High Country Roses, and it just won the 2024 American Rose Society Award of Excellence.
Oh my goodness.
For a miniature, a small shrub, and a no spray condition. And I've heard from some of the people that trialed it, and it has done well everywhere, even, north. It's done very, very well. So yes, I have a little rose, petite peach, and it's just been a really fun, a very unique experience for me, of course, and it's just been really fun.
Well, congratulations. That's really exciting and just awesome. I'm going to make sure that I get one to try, but I'm so happy for you. That's wonderful.
Well, your no spray garden, it could be just the ticket. They're little sprays of sweetheart roses, much like petite pink. So anyway, petite pink is just almost bulletproof here. And I just love it because I love to put those sprays and arrangements and things. So it's fabulous. Well, thanks for asking. So now let's talk about one more thing in your garden. You had I think it was your first open garden?
Oh yeah. So I've never had one before. I'm just nervous. When I've got my YouTube channel and the Facebook and the Instagram, and I can frame things the way that I want to. And so it really puts you in a vulnerable position when you are kind of pulling back that curtain and showing everybody the good and the bad. I mean, they get to see it all. Yeah. So I was nervous, but after visiting the gardens in England, I decided it's really important for people to be able to learn, and it's okay if they see things that they don't like, because it's going to help them develop the garden of their dreams, to be able to say, I really don't like how she did this, or that statue is like that, but they'll come up with ideas of what would work and what they would like in their garden. And so I made that decision last year that I was going to open the garden. And so I did, and I had it over 2 days. And I reached out to my local Rose Society and had, 20 or 30 people come out one day. And then what I also did is I put a sign at my road for all of my neighbors so that they could come see, because oftentimes while I'm out there gardening, we kind of chit chat at the fence line, and I offer to let them come through when things look pretty and in bloom, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And so I wanted them to know what they could look for. And so it was really nice to have the community come out also and see the garden. And of course I opened it up to the folks that are local on my Facebook. And, I think it was a success. It's a lot of work and stress moving up to those days, because you're wondering, is it going to be in bloom? Is it going to look okay? How do I make sure that everybody gets a good show while they're here? And so what I did was I put together a mapping of our beds, where the roses are, in case there was a specific one that they were looking for. And the way that I decided to do the open garden was based on, when I went to England and I was visiting the gardens, what did I enjoy most? And what I enjoyed was being able to immerse myself initially in the garden and have my own takeaways and thoughts before we work with the tour guide and have them walk around with us and show us specific things. Because at that point, I've already kind of formulated my feelings and my thoughts and my questions, Mm-hmm. And so what we did was we allowed people to have an hour by themselves walking around and taking it in. And then I walked around with everybody and talked about what was important to me and where we were going in the future, what my favorite roses were. And so I liked that. And then I had a little takeaway for everybody. My favorite plant, I gave everybody a little Walker's Low Nepeta to take home and grow my favorite plant in the garden if they wanted to. So all in all, I think it was a success, and I really enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to doing it again in the future. Did you do an open garden this year?
No, I didn't. We had so much deer damage and so much winter damage that we made the decision to do some tweaks to the garden. Just since the arbors weren't covered, we were going to do some tweaks to the arbors. It's been a long time because the roses are there and you can't really adjust anything. And so we were going to do some tweaks to the arbors. That was the main thing. And then just kind of redefine some of the garden beds, which usually means that I take more of Mr. G's grass. But that wasn't really the goal. Well, wasn't the only goal. We have very big trees now, and we're just trying to find the sun for some of the roses. We have mini roses. A lot of the shrubs, they can take some shade for sure, and it's okay. But I'm just really trying to follow the sun line as the trees we've lost some limbs in these mature trees. They started out tiny when my kids were little, and that now they're losing limbs, and so we decided this would be the year to do that. But last year, at Open Garden, it was pouring rain, like the garden was actually flooded right up into the day. And I really thought about canceling. And then I reached into my England roots because, my daughter lives there. And I thought, now if we were in England, we would just tell people, grab your willies and an umbrella and come see the garden. And that's what I did. I sent out some messages and got on Facebook and the internet and just said, the garden is going to be open. Grab your wellies and your umbrella and come. But do you know that it was about 45 minutes before they were to come, it stopped raining. It was so hot. It dried up. I don't think we had rain for 7 weeks after that. But it was so wonderful because people were so sure we'd probably cancel. And they came. I think we had, for my garden, and we had 100 people. It was a lot. And so it was fun, and it's so worth it. There's nothing like seeing your garden through the eyes of other garden lovers. It is a gift, and they know it's a gift, and they know it's work. But I just tell people, and I'm sure you do too, you're going to see things that you love. You're going to see things that you hate. You're going to see things under construction, and you're going to see things, and you're going to say, what in the world was she thinking? So with that, go have fun, make a note, take a picture, and enjoy the garden, because it brings me so much pleasure. And I gave away zinnias, so we're on the same place.
Okay, good.
I gave away zinnias. So anyway, but I do encourage people to do that. And I'm so glad that you did. You have so much to offer your garden. And so I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah, I am happy I did too. And next year, I don't think that we'll be able to do it just because we're going to be in the middle of a renovation, but now start thinking about the following year having an open garden, but then I can also spend next season just visiting everybody else's garden locally that they have in bloom.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, now let's talk about this garden tour that you took last summer. Now, you went on one of Paul Zimmerman's garden tours that we've been hearing so much about because he's just back from France, and I'm just pea green with envy for those people who got to go. So, but you took one of those tours last summer to England.
I did. And, for me, it was a dream. I didn't think that I would ever go. I don't like traveling. Even though I put myself on YouTube, I have anxiety. I'm a little bit of an introvert. And so leaving my own personal garden, it was a huge step for me. And I'm such a nervous Nelly. For anybody who knows me traveling, I get lost everywhere. And so what pushed me over to want to do this was the fact that it was inclusive. Basically, if I could get myself to the airport, I would practically be picked up and whisked away for 2 weeks with not a care in the world. I don't have to think about everything. Everything's planned for me. Now, with that, if you are somebody who wants to be able to kind of go your own way, I think you have that flexibility too. So either way, I think it's a really appealing trip. And I was able to tailor parts of my trip, and I'll tell you about that when we get to it. But I I really enjoyed this trip, and it was a dream to see gardens that I only see through photographs. And so I hope to be able to go back one day and visit with fresh eyes again and see if I still have those same feelings that I did as I entered each one of the gardens.
So what were some of the aha moments to being in the English gardens as opposed to being in, in your own garden or an American garden? Were there just things that were just very different, or?
Well, one of the things that I think that we all kind of talked about on the trip was the gardens were really clean and weed-free, no mulch. So it's rare to see a garden that's not mulch, whereas here in the United States, I think it's the opposite. It's rare to see a garden that doesn't have mulch or some kind of a top dressing. And so that was interesting from our perspective to see that. And it kind of made me rethink some of the ways that I'm gardening and wanting to use maybe the tools that they use, the hose, just to keep all of the weeds that are not rooted very deep. But that was interesting seeing that. You've got so many different styles out there. You're going to see a cottage garden that's overflowing with plants, but then if you're looking for a structured garden, you're going to see that too. I think that there weren't any other real ahas where I was like, oh, wow, that's totally different, at least that I can think of right now as I'm talking, besides, the mulch. But it's just, going and visiting these gardens, the weather was perfect. It was the perfect time of year. We visited the last week in June. Everything was full flush. It was just absolutely perfect. And we didn't have rain. It was cool enough that you wanted to kind of have a windbreaker on each day. And that was really nice because some of the places that we were staying didn't have air conditioning. Maybe that's an aha moment. But they were beautiful, and the food was amazing. So I can't say enough about the trip experience. If you can go on an all-inclusive trip, you're not going to be disappointed.
I think that's really like the best endorsement Paul could possibly get, because there was a day that going on trips, I wanted to be my own person and, do my own thing. But now those words all inclusive just sound so perfect. And, and I know all the planning that Paul puts into it, and I'm just so appreciative of that. So, yes, I think those are very, very good words to us. Now, was there a garden that stood out to you? No, not David Austin Roses. You can't mention that one yet.
Okay.
So other than David Austin Roses, was there a garden that just stood out and you thought, oh, I want to be that garden?
Yeah, it was, each garden really had a different feeling about it. And for me, the one that absolutely stood out to me and brought me to tears because it was just perfect, it spoke to my soul, was Lady Column's garden. I think it's called Clinton Lodge is the name of her garden specifically, but her garden, every single room, because it was broken out into rooms that you looked at, was just perfect. And it was my taste. You walked into one of the first rooms, and it was a blue and white garden surrounded by box hedge. Just absolutely perfect. And the beautiful grass was so tranquil on this walk, and it was wide and welcoming and expansive, so many things at one time. And then the way that the room was created, you can't see beyond that room what's next. And so you're just it begs you to go further. And so when you get into the next room, I know one of them was, it's a knot garden, and it was huge, but it had line of sight at each path with a beautiful concrete structure. And so you wanted to take that in. And the box was interesting at this garden because I learned more about box. For whatever reason, I thought that they had to be 2 foot by 2 foot, and at this garden, they had them 6 inches wide and, only maybe, a foot tall. And that was so fascinating to me. And when I was able to track down one of the workers there and ask them, the gardeners, they said, yeah, anytime you want a box hedge, you can make them as narrow as you want, and they'll be just as happy as can be. And that was eye-opening for me, because I love kind of that closed look, but I didn't know how narrow I could make them. And sometimes on a walkway, I don't have enough room for a box to be, more than a foot or so. Mm-hmm. So anyways, but that garden, looking at that garden, I saw so many different takeaways for plants that I wanted to try. That was actually the first time I ever saw Lady's Mantle. And Lady's Mantle has light, very large leaves with yellow blooms, but they were using it also as a border edge. And I fell in love with that. And they had so many different gates, different styles of gates at each one of these rooms that she had created. And the gate is always open to let you know, welcome, come in. And so I just loved looking at gates. And I don't have any in my yard right now, but I want some now that I've seen how pretty they can be and how welcoming. So I would have to say that was one of my favorite gardens. And when you do something like this, you're going to have an immediate feeling when you walk into a garden, whether it feels welcoming or there's something that bothers you that you can't quite put your finger on, and you'll take pictures. And after you're kind of studying them and you get home, you'll be able to realize what bothers you. And so on the opposite of gardens that I love, a garden that really bothered me, and many people might love, but for me, it was confusing and not relaxing. It was beautiful. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely beautiful, but modestant. And it was one large open room that I can't even quantify how big. It felt like a football field, but my mind could not process all of the color and no relaxation in my head of a pause. So it was maybe overstimulating for me to look at this garden. And so, but there's a takeaway. Even when you see gardens that you don't like, you're going to start looking back now at your garden style and saying, hey, is that how people feel when they come into this part of the garden?
Is that off-putting, or am I welcoming them? Yeah, I can see.
Or is it a riot of color that really bothers people? And so I've been taking a hard look at my entrances specifically into our gardens to make sure that they're calming and welcoming. And I am going to have to make some moves that I think in the future. But so anyways, so I have my favorite garden, and then I have my least favorite. And then some of the other ones just kind of fall in the middle. But there's a takeaway from every single garden that you go to.
Oh, I'm tempted to ask you this. Well, let's just do it. How many pictures? Let's just do it. How many pictures do you think you took?
Oh gosh, my husband would know, because he was there with me. But it was we took so many pictures, and of course I was creating the videos. I think a lot of the videos are 40 minutes each for each of the gardens. But if anybody's interested in seeing those gardens, I don't know if it was 10 or so that we went to. But if you can be patient, so I was learning how at that time to do walking tours, and I would get so excited that I would quickly turn. And so I did get some feedback from people after I had already put together, 2 or 3 videos, that the panning was too much. But in the event that you're in that situation, you're listening to this right now and you want to go check out those videos and you suffer from vertigo, there's a setting that you can put on YouTube to slow it down so that hopefully you can still enjoy it. But yeah, we took a lot of pictures.
I watched the videos and they were good. They were good. Very good. And so let's talk about the big one. And just recently watched it again. Your time at David Austin Roses. I know this definitely was a bucket list for you. So what was it like?
It was dreaming. It was like surreal, because you see it. All of the other gardens that we went to visit, I didn't have, I just don't think that they're promoted as much, or I just didn't, I didn't have memories of seeing them in magazines and so forth. And so going to David Austin's garden was surreal, because I was seeing all of these pictures that everybody shares on the internet. Now I'm seeing them in person, and being able to take in not just sight, but sound and scent, and just a whole different feeling. And so then they've got the peacocks that are walking around. And when people are taking pictures, they don't often capture the sound of this unique bird. And I even had one person comment on one of my videos, and they said, I hear a cat. Why does this cat keep on going in the video? And I was like, that's not a cat, it's a peacock. But they are loud, and they are just very fun birds. They really dominate whatever space they're in, and they're beautiful. But anyways, so being at David Austin, you just want to look at all of these roses that are planted in mass, because they're planting, 7 in one space, so that you get this huge pop of color. And so that was really lovely to take in that. And then, of course, to see roses that we can't grow, or we don't have available to us in the US. Some of the varieties that I fell in love with, Morning Mist, is a beautiful rose that has single petals, but it's kind of a coral rust color. I can't wait until we can get that, hopefully one day here. Carolyn Knight, we don't have here. So visiting that garden, I mean, I can totally geek out right now, even just thinking about it, because it was just so magical, I would say, being there. The only negative is that we weren't there alone. There were people, other people that were there. And so I would kind of have to wait for the right shot when, there weren't too many people in the view. But they have all of the pergolas and arches that are covered. And very interesting is roses that they are using as climbers there, that they don't advertise as climbers here. And one of those would be Mill on the Floss. So I saw Mill on the Floss, and it's climbing, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I've heard so many people talk about how this rose grows really tall, and here they've got it as a climber. So that was interesting. And, there were some roses that were absent from the garden. And so when you think about the roses that people are scouring for, everybody talks about Evelyn. I don't think Evelyn was in the garden. And so, I think what I wish is that they had some kind of a museum section, a living museum. I wish that they would keep all of the roses that they've grown. Granted, that could be huge, but I would love to see all of them, even that aren't in circulation, that I might not have in my garden. I wish that they had something like that there, but it was really a lovely space. And it's one of those things that I'll think about for a long time, I think, just because of the sheer beauty. And the only other thing that I'll add about David Austin is that they had the main section of exhibition. They don't have any companion plants. So it is just all 100% roses, which is kind of how I garden here. But they had just rooms and rooms with no companion plants. And then they had, I think there was only one room where they actually had companion plants. Maybe it was called, that wasn't the lion's room. The name escapes me right now, but there was one room where they had companion plants with the roses. And that's where I found Nautia. I think it's called Knautia. And that's one of my new favorite companion plants, because it's just really whimsical. And I love the way that it looks with the roses. But anyways, I hope everyone has a chance to visit David Austin Roses in person, but if not, I hope that you'll enjoy the video that I put together.
Oh, it was very, very good. And you could tell this was peak. I thought, how fortunate. So many people go there, and it isn't peak. I mean, it's just rarely happens. So, I mean, it was just glorious. I could tell. Yeah, it was.
I even enjoyed walking around the shopping center, looking at all the plants and pretending that I could bring something home with me, which I did not. But seeing, like Summer Song. I love Summer Song. But what's interesting is, and I keep on reminding myself, they don't sell it in the US for a reason, because it was tested here and it didn't perform well for most people. But even if you look at it in the video, you can tell that it is defoliated. The blooms are there, but it's defoliated, which leads me to believe that maybe it's not super happy in that garden also. But hopefully, as people are watching the videos that I do, if I'm able to share with them, if the tag is there, a lot of these gardens don't have labels and tags, which can be frustrating. But if I share which variety it is, hopefully you'll be able to get a really good look at the entire shrub by itself and how it's growing in that environment versus just an up close picture of a bloom.
Yes. So helpful. So helpful. Now, as a result of this trip, how soon was it that you placed your first order for something you saw there?
Oh my gosh.
Not just David Austin, England in general.
I didn't even make it home. So when I went, let's see, which garden was that?
The magic of the internet.
Yeah, I want to say it might have actually been after one of the very first gardens, even though I was absolutely overwhelmed at Montesfont. I want to say that when we got to the best, I went online to a vendor and bought Valsham Blue. I bought 2 of them because the climber was just so sweet and beautiful and perfect. And so those are growing now. But yes, I did not even make it out of one garden before I had ordered at home. So thank God for the internet.
That does not surprise me one bit, that excitement. And I also have 2 Velsham Blouses, and one scouring an evergreen and one scouring the dead half of a maple tree. Yes. That it just scampering right up there. And it is one of the first things to bloom here, and it is beautiful. I'm glad you have it.
Oh, and we went to visit, if you look at the thumbnail that I did for the garden for Michael Marriott, we got to visit his personal garden. And I bought, after being at his home and looking at this beautiful rambler, I bought Rambling Rector. And I have been so nervous about this rose because it's like a house eater. It is huge. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to think about this rose forever. And it'll always remind me of Michael Marriott's garden, but I want to try it. And so I do have it here, and it seems very happy. So we'll see. We'll see if it ends up taking over my whole house.
I know we have those. Yes, I have a couple of those. And, they just remind us of beautiful things, just what our garden does. Those, just getting to see that, those things change us. And every time we see that, we tap into that change. Yeah. Now, trips, they always change us, but especially a trip like this as a gardener. So you've touched on it a little bit, but how has this trip changed you as a gardener?
Well, I really need to think about, how does my garden make me feel? How does it make others feel? And that never really occurred to me before. I just, I was just kind of putting my plantings together. And I think it really took time for me to get to a place where I started thinking about all of the senses and, how does it smell? And a lot of times people will, enter our property and say, oh my gosh, it smells so amazing. Can't you smell that? And I really can't. I don't know if it's one of those things where when you're constantly surrounded by something, you become kind of numb to it. Now, if I really focus in, let me go smell this rose, then of course I can. But I started thinking more about entrances and shielding views so that you don't get to see what's beyond, putting mock orange and hummingbird or honeysuckle at entrances, things that people will take away as scent and feeling. And then even something as simple as the sound of walking. I love pea gravel, and I want to hear it kind of crunching under my feet as I walk. So it really has started changing me so that I want to look at the more of that overall feeling, and what do I want somebody to experience when they walk into each section of the garden? I mean, do you feel the same way with your gardening?
My 35 years ago when I started, I wanted an English cottage garden. So, and I have a woodworking husband. So I planned, these big arbors and gates and all that he could do for me. And they've aged well, and it looks like a very old garden, which now it is getting to be an old garden. Well, not hundreds of years old like you find in England, but I've got to spend since my daughter lives in England, I got to spend lots of time there and learned that living with the people, it is a nation of gardeners. And one of the things that I picked up is they're just more relaxed about it. And that's my time there has made me more relaxed about it. But it's also made me want to pack in the flowers. And it's also made me want to try things I've never tried before, like dahlias, because they talk about their dahlias and they are so amazing. And I got to be there at different seasons and see like, whoa, this is sweet pea season. I see why they love them. Oh, this is hollyhock season. Oh my goodness, there's walls of them. Oh, it's dahlias. So it opened me up to what some of these plants could be that maybe I hadn't grown before. So in those ways, I picked up, just things from them. And then my favorite tool, which is a hori knife, never really heard of it before, but it is a constant companion to English gardeners, it seems. So just little things like that. But I think the biggest thing in aesthetics would be just relaxing about it, not expecting as much perfection, just relax and enjoy the garden.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I've definitely become, as I'm gardening longer, I'm much more relaxed because a lot of it is learned. If people reach out to me and they say, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing XYZ in the garden, and it's just new to them. Mm-hmm. Whereas when you've been gardening for a while and the cycles of your garden and that you're going to have the same problems probably every year around the same time, whether if it's pest related or if it's a high pressure of humidity, you're going to have black spot after the first flush. And so I think that there does become a point where you just get a little bit more relaxed and you just kind of go with it and enjoy every single phase. And when I say that, we're getting ready to go into Japanese beetles in the next 2 weeks. And I know that with that, in the years past, I would have been so upset and frustrated, and I would fight against it so that I'm just taking care of the beetles every day, go out 3 times a day with my soapy water, try to see the blooms through the beetles. And now I've reached a level of acceptance where as soon as I see them, I'm going to take off every bud and bloom in my garden and hope that they will get bored and go find somebody else somewhere else. But if they want to be on my leaves because there's no buds or blooms, I'll still go out there with my soapy water, but I'm not going to get upset. And instead of spinning my wheels and getting frustrated about them eating the blooms, that's when I'm going to go focus on a project, whether it's let's defoliate the leaves, let's work on that pathway that I've been wanting to do. And so I do look forward to every phase that I know is coming, even though it might not be a fun time, with blooms.
Absolutely. They aggravate us, but they don't win. They do they do die and they do go away for a while. And one of the things that, I do the dousing them in the soapy water as well. And it gets less, I do that less as it heats up. We get some pretty hot temperatures and the roses are going to go dormant somewhat anyway. So I do the same thing that you're talking about. I'm going to cut off the blooms, especially of those that they particularly like, and just give the roses a break and take care of some other things. So yeah, they rob for a while, but last year I didn't have as many, and that's nice. So maybe they've fallen out of love with my garden. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, and then speaking about England, they don't have Japanese beetles there, so that was nice. That they don't have them.
Yes. There's just, you mentioned air conditioning. I went into very few places in England that had air conditioning. That's just not something they have or need. So it's just different. And one other thing I was going to bring up is the appreciation for the big garden that I have. A lot of the gardens that I saw there, they were very small gardens, or people were gardening in allotments, which they were very, very glad to get and waited years for. So we're very fortunate, those of us who have, this extra space to enjoy, for sure.
Now, this isn't garden related. This is just funny. If my husband was here with me, he would be whispering in my ear that, tell Teresa that they don't put ice in their soda. He's a huge soda drinker. And so he found it very interesting. Every single time he said, could I have ice? They looked at him like he had three eyes.
Yeah.
And so they like things kind of at room temperature. Yeah. And soda was actually harder to find. My husband and I were not drinking on that tour. And so when we asked for soda, that was more of a luxury because we had wine at every dinner. And it just seemed, they looked at us funny when we said that we wanted our second soda or our third soda. They looked at us like we had a real problem.
Yeah. Culture's different. It really is, and, that's just one of the things, they do have a more relaxed take on those kinds of things. It's not going to be really, really cold or, whatever. But yep, that, you just not going to get your icy drink there. That's for sure. Yes, something you'll have to learn to live without for a little while. Well, we were talking about some of the pests. So while we have you, could you share some of your tips for growing roses?
Well, what I've learned over the years now is that people do not get married to a rose. And what I mean is that, yes, some of them are very special and they have a memory behind them. They were, our great grandmothers. And so I understand keeping those in the garden. But one of the things that you need to be careful of is if whatever the trend is. So let's say this year it's honey Dijon and everybody wants it and they can't find it, but don't just order it for your garden because you think it's highly desirable. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence. Does it grow in your zone? What does the reviews on Help Me Find say about this rose? And don't be afraid to get rid of a rose if it doesn't work, because as you mentioned, there's so many varieties that are coming out every year that are healthy and healthier, more disease resistant. And so what I do is I give a rose 3 years. I keep a tracking spreadsheet. As soon as it hits its third year, if it's been nothing but a problem and it doesn't bring me joy, then it's time to go. And I, have lots of other roses that I can choose from in the garden that I could get multiples of to give me a punch of color, put 3 in one area. But so that's one of the things I think that has been the most important to me, is making sure that I look for really good varieties. And I know that when you and I have met in the past, I really like Cortez roses or Mayan. And so those are my favorites. And why are they my favorites? It's because they've been grown in an environment where they are not given pesticides as they're being tested. So they're tested in environments where they're just kind of let go so that they can be for the organic gardener. You'll find that most of them have very dark, glossy leaves, which is for me a huge bonus to be able to prevent black spot. So those are the varieties I think that I'm looking for most. And so every 3 years, or every year when I'm looking at my 3-year plus roses and I'm deciding to remove one, it's being replaced with something that's proven to be hardy and disease resistance. And I just want to put a plug out there really quick for the American Rose Society. They have a listing that they put out every year that members vote on for hardiness, and you can search on that on their page and find what they're recommending for specific zones. And then you could also get in touch with your local Rose Society to see what's working for them.
Absolutely. Do you have a rose this year that's just outperforming itself?
Oh, well, it's always Bliss. It's always Bliss Parfuma, and I can't take enough pictures of her. She speaks to my soul. Every single time I see her, she just is divine. And so I have one at my mailbox, and I just showed everybody recently on Facebook her picture, and I think she's just going to be a superstar in the next coming years. And then I have an entire bed of Bliss because she's just so healthy and, you know, resistant to anything. So I can just kind of plant her and leave her and just enjoy going and looking at her, instead of having to pick off leaves because she's got black spot. That just doesn't happen. But besides Bliss, because I think I'll be talking about her for the rest of my life, let's see, other roses that people can find. I'm testing right now on our star garden at the waterfront, Top Cream, and that's showing great promise. Bolero is always awesome and highly fragrant. Delish is a beautiful hot pink color that's constantly in bloom for us. Princess Charlene de Monaco is just a standout rose. Who else? I've got Bliss down there. Oh, Raspberry Cupcake is a fun one. That is a bright hot pink, and then it kind of, what it's doing for me right now, I don't know if it'll change as it gets older, but it really reminds me of another favorite of mine with Benjamin Britten, that it's got this hot pink color, but then the outer leaves kind of whitewash down as it gets ages, the bloom ages. And so that one is really beautiful and fun to look at. So, you know, I've got a lot of roses that bring me joy and are very healthy. How about you?
Well, because of you, I have Bliss, and I ordered another one. I had one last year. Now, the one last year struggled a little bit, and so the one this year has just taken right off. So she's just first year, so we'll see. But I'm already seeing some buds, and I'm very hopeful. So I'm excited about her. Yeah. One that I am over the moon about is a new one. I had a test rose, just a small little test rose last year of Reminiscent Pink, and proven winners. And right now, she was not bothered by deer. She was not bothered by winter. I really didn't have to even cut her back when I had to cut so many back to the ground. She has right now at least 100 bud or blooms. She's absolutely fantastic. She's fragrant. There's not any disease. And she's just a great growth habit. And it's a David Austin looking bloom. It's absolutely fantastic. And then another new one that, pardon.
I was going to say, I hope that I know you've got your YouTube with your videos. I really hope to see pictures of her.
I think I might have just, if I haven't put her up, I've got her about ready to go. Okay. So the other one that has I've heard about for years, Plum Perfect, and I bought 3 their first year, but they're absolutely outstanding first year. Right out of the gate, they're covered in blooms right now. Beautiful. So highly recommend that one. And you mentioned Top Cream, and when Matt Douglas was here on Rose Chat a week or so ago, he said that was one of the standouts that he's seeing as well. So I'm going to have to get that one. I don't have it. Let's see who else is just being Vanessa Bell. She has just got my heart. She's the right yellow for me. Yeah. You know, I've got sort of a pale garden. I don't do a lot of reds or. Yeah. So anyway, my garden's kind of pale, and she just fits right in.
That's wonderful. Now, do you have the Reminiscent coral or white?
No, I don't. Okay. I have, is it Reminiscent Crema? I have that one. It's covered in blooms. Okay. So that's the white one. But the coral, I think maybe was just released, or maybe it's new for this year or next year. I don't have it. Okay. But it looks beautiful. But just fantastic, absolutely fantastic success with it this year. So for just 1 year, that's fabulous.
Yeah, my daughter just started growing roses. And so what I did this year was I sent her things that I thought that she could be successful with. And I got her set up with a drip. And her favorite right now is Plum Perfect. I sent her Bliss, of course, and Distant Drums and Plum Perfect. And so she's seen them all bloom. She thought that Distant Drums was going to be her favorite. But now that she has seen Plum Perfect, she says that that's her new fave.
Well, good for her. I mean, it really is outstanding. And I have one more that I have to mention because I have 3 or 4 of them and I've had them 4 years. One I put out in the various back where it's getting absolutely no care. I kind of forgot about it. It's absolutely gorgeous right now. And that's Quietness. It's a Dr. Buck rose, and it has just been a performer for all of these years. And it looks like a hybrid tea bloom. It's very fragrant, so healthy. So I know it's been around a long time, but it is one that I think, especially a new gardener, just take a chance on Quietness. It is a beauty.
I'm going to have to look at my list and see if I have that one.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
you'd love it. You'd love it. It's really good. Okay, I think we've just about covered everything that we were going to talk about and a whole lot more.
Yeah, when you and I get together, we can always talk about so many things. I mean, I need more time than an hour, but I don't want to bore people. So I will look forward to when you and I can get together again. And, I guess my hope from this, the only thing that I would say in closing is if you're nervous about showing your gardens, try to break through that and go to see other people's gardens first. You're going to learn so much. So get in touch with the American Rose Society, your local societies, and find people in your area to connect with, because you're going to learn so much from either varieties that you like or give you ideas for design. So go check out other people's gardens, even if you can't go on a, England trip. Many of us can't. So go visit other people and then consider opening your garden so that you can meet new folks that want to come learn from you.
Oh, I couldn't have said it better. And if you're an introvert, you're in good company. Most gardeners I know, including myself, are very introverted. We do what we do because we love roses and we want you to love them. We want you to know about them, but you're going to find many people. If you're an introvert and it's stopping you or holding you back, you're going to find many people just like you.
Yeah, and I think when you're saying that, I really feel like I remember seeing somebody on a T-shirt one time where they said, "Introvert, but we'll talk about roses."
There you go. There you go. Absolutely. Well, Kimberley, thanks so much for coming to chat today. I loved hearing about your trip, and I'm just so proud of you for doing your open garden. I wish I could come, and maybe I'll come to the next one.
Oh, I would love that. And maybe I'll come visit yours too.
Oh, it'd be so nice. And friends, thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to know more about the garden tours that Paul takes, you can find information at paulzimmermanroses.com. I notice he's already booking for 2024. So if you want all-inclusive, I think he's got your number. And until next time, just relax and have fun in your garden.
You've been listening to the Rose Chat podcast with Chris VanCleave and Teresa Byington, expert rose gardeners who want to help you achieve the rose garden of your dreams. Don't miss an episode. Listen anytime on our website at rosechatpodcast.com or listen on the go via the Rose Chat app on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. Share this podcast with your social networks and join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by using the hashtag RoseChat. Join us next time for another edition of the Rose Chat Podcast. The Rose Chat Podcast is a production of the Rose Chat Media Group, Birmingham, Alabama.